Sometimes a peat shed isn't just a peat shed. So, in the 1800s, there were a lot of illicit stills in Scotland. Primarily because, the English, always because the English and taxes and excisemen, like the first taxes against the Scots started in 1644, really, with the malt tax. But that started one could argue 150 years, basically up until 1823. 150, 60 years of illegal distillation. I mean, that's where the term moonshine comes from. And the stories that surround the era of illicit distillation in the Highlands in Scotland are tragic and hilarious sometimes. And even at one point, there's stories of Scotsmen hiding whiskey in caskets and in podiums, priest podiums. That's not the right word for priest podium. It's something else, but I can't remember what it is. Pulpits and funeral processions where they have a wagon with supposedly a dead body and mourners. Up in Highland Park in the Orkney Islands, there's a story of them pretending that an entire house had the smallpox to keep the excisemen from coming in and checking that that's where they were hiding all their whiskey. Like there's just... there was a whole era where people would turn in an illegal still that was theirs to collect the reward money and then take the reward money and use it to buy more new equipment to build a new still. It's just so good. But, I mean, look, even Robert Burns, the poet bard of Scotland, was an exciseman. That's how he fell in love with whiskey. But around 1823, the Duke of Gordon helped get a law passed that made a Highland distillation license reasonably accessible to distillers in the Highlands. One of his tenants was George Smith, who founded Glenlivet, which you might have heard of. It was so reasonable that basically the tide turned, and it became not a reasonable thing to keep maintaining illicit distillation when the price for having a licensed distillery and thus the ability to profit off of it were way more approachable. So around that same time, and by the way, let's just say, they got a license and the Highland distillers could open up licensed distilleries. So after that, everything was fine and the Scots and the English just got along perfectly after that because that was the only thing holding them back, right, guys? All right, but first let's talk about Glencadam 21, and this I would say is a gift from Murray Waters, who is a truly generous human being. Thank you, sir, and cheers. Now we've done Glencadam 15, which is one of my favorite, just approachable scotches. Glencadam 21 is a different color, but also, I say, founded in 1825, only a couple years after Glenlivet. And it's totally different place. It's technically a Highland distillery, but it's on the south, and this is from your perspective. If this is Speyside, it's on the south edge towards St. Edward's on the way to Edinburgh. It's out of the Speyside, but right on the south edge of it. And it's currently owned by Angus Dundee, who also makes Tomintoul, if you've tried that one, Spirit of the Speyside. It's also in Ballantine's as the malt round, one of the malts in Ballantine's blended scotch. What I love about Glencadam and is that it's got this sort of like vanilla black pepper combo, although the 21 adds a little bit more fruit to it. It's subtle, but it's not boring, and it's dense but not heavy. Glencadam as a malt always sort of dances across categories, and every time I drink it, I'm reminded of how much I love it. I would put it in the category of something I would describe as almost delicate, for lack of a better word. A little musty, but nice. Oh, come on. Guys, that is vanilla cream fruit bowl stone fruits and honey, a hint of black pepper. This is a treat. I think this one ranges in like the $300 range, which for a 21-year-old malt is not bad. I know that that's embarrassing to say, like $300 is not bad. That's a total whiskey nerd. Only whiskey people. It's called whiskey math. I keep seeing that online these days. Whiskey math. That's whiskey math, right? $300 for a 21-year-old whiskey? That's no big deal at all. It'd be a shame not to buy it. Whiskey math. So, it's just gentle. It's nice. Okay. So, it's in this era that a story is told, and I'll sort of explain why I chose Glencadam. It's a reach, but it's a reach. It's not a reach in my head. It's a reach probably for you guys. So, McGregor had a farm, and his farm was in the Speyside district, and he had been an illicit distiller for years, and he's not far from George Smith in Glenlivet. And then the license gets passed in 1823. And excisemen who have formerly been going around and enforcing, but also sort of turning a blind eye now and then, right, are all of a sudden now going like, no more blind eye. And the exciseman has been befriended by McGregor, fed and treated with whiskey and just taken care of every time he comes through. So they have an affinity, shall we say. So the exciseman shows up on the property, and McGregor is giving him a tour of the property. And as they're walking around looking at everything, the exciseman, the gauger, says, what's that shed? What's that building barn? He says, oh, that's my peat shed. No bother. That's my peat shed. He says, oh, okay. So they sit down, they have drinks and food, and he's finally getting ready to leave, and he's putting on his coat. And I sort of, Zach Smith said this in one of our classes, our vice chancellor, and and I'm totally stealing it. He said, I sort of envisioned him as Columbo, where he was like, as he's putting on his coat and he's walking out the door, he's like, oh, one more thing. If I were you, McGregor, I'd get a license for that peat shed. And McGregor goes, none. All right. So he does. And the distillery that becomes is Balmenach. 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 It's still alive to this day, but they, I can't remember who owns them, but they don't release single malts. They only use the malt for blends. And it's right in the middle of the Speyside, and it's still considered a classic, old-school Speyside single malt. And these days, you can only try it in independent bottling releases for the most part. So like Signatory and SMWS, they've got Balmenach releases. Signatory Vintage has some Balmenach releases. But you can't really buy it as a malt bottle on the shelf. Now, I've had Balmenach and I like it, and it's not Glencadam, but it's in the direction of Glencadam. When I hold space in my head, even though Balmenach is in Speyside and Glencadam is Low Highland, I still hold them in the same family in my head. And so when I was trying to think of what do we drink when talking about Glencadam, I was like, or Balmenach, let's do Glencadam. That's Daniel math. So, may not make sense for anybody else, but it's fine for me. By the way, this is the last episode before Christmas. So I hope that you're with family, and I hope that you're surrounded by those who love you. I hope that you're enjoying incredible food and whiskey with community and the people who care about you most. Because that's what whiskey's for. Stories, people, community, and peat sheds. So here's to you. Happy Christmas. I'm really glad you're here. Cheers.